Welcome, everyone. It's another special episode of the Buck Stops Here. You can't have a buck or Buck Stops Here without a buck. That's me. I'm the Buck. Kirk Buckner. I run NotInHallOfFame.com and the United States Athletic Hall of Fame, which my guest here today, former Broncos Fan of the Year, Ron Katz, was a part of. Ron was kind enough to help us shape who's on the ballot. And you can go and vote right now at www.theusahof.com and help shape the third class of the United States Athletic Hall of Fame. And Ron, my good friend from Denver, well, from Pittsburgh, now Denver. Either way,
Oh, Denver native.
Denver native. Denver, but you were in Pittsburgh for a while.
I was there, but
Okay,
Denver's home.
okay. A Coloradan. Coloradian?
It's all good.
Okay, it's going to have to be. Yeah, that's why I have this right here in the background. And
Go.
Ron and I, we were sort of like going back and forth on the X Machine, and he was sort of like bringing up something interesting that we've been talking about a lot here on the shows recently, and that's the situation in Los Angeles with the Clippers. And we have Kawhi Leonard, who may or may not have found a way, or Steve Ballmer, rather, the owner of the Clippers, potentially has found a way, or not, we don't know, to get Kawhi Leonard $50 million extra. And for those who haven't been paying attention, long story short, I'll keep it as concise as I can. Kawhi Leonard signed a sponsorship deal with a company called Aspiration that is now out of business. Aspiration was about green green banking, and they would help plant trees towards everything, which they didn't really do much of, as it turned out. They went under, but Kawhi was paid to be a spokesperson, and he did absolutely as much as Ron and I had did for Aspiration. We just didn't get 50 million.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty good job if you can get it.
And well, so the initial thought, and this was all uncovered by the former ESPN person, one of the many people who got purged, and one of the many ESPN purges, Pablo Torre, who did a great job sort of uncovering this. This is what he found, that there was $50 million that went there. Steve Ballmer had actually donated, or invested rather, not donated, that's the incorrect word, to this company. Ballmer, after this came out, said the day after, I was scammed just like everybody else. But since that time, it was revealed that he invested another 10 million. And before everything sort of went under for Aspiration, Kawhi got his money. So they made sure that Kawhi was one of the people who was paid. Seems a little fishy. And Ron, you have a different take on this, or at least a little bit more nuance that a lot of people haven't been talking about. At least I haven't seen that since you mentioned that to me. So
Yeah, yeah, and I can't judge what happened. And big praise to Steve Ballmer for going on meet with media and explaining his perspective on it. Because look around the NFL, the NBA, MLB, NHL, some pretty strong owners and leaders would be barricaded in their penthouse suite, no comment or whatever, and letting the story get out of hand. So props to him for trying to set the record straight from his perspective. I'm not passing any judgment, but what I saw as a smoking gun from Pablo's story was you had 1.95 million going to the bank. And then Kawhi, I don't know if it was a week later or a couple days later, getting 1.5 million on the day that I think layoffs were being announced and things like that at the business. And that fits the parameters, not exactly, because you don't know, it's not really a criminal activity per se, unless you're trying to cheat the IRS or some other thing that would constitute criminal. Uh, but when you pass money from one entity to the other entity, and then it goes out to a third entity in pretty quick time frame, that's the basis for U.S. anti-money laundering laws that were established after the tragic 9/11 back in 2001. In fact, anyone who works for a financial institution, and it doesn't have to be someone who's customer facing, they're trained every year I used to work for a financial company, and I was not, you know, touching the money or anything like that. But and everyone's trained to keep an eye out for odd behavior. Why would someone put some money in and take it right out? Uh, and that's kind of the basis of money laundering. Uh, Now we know Kawhi Leonard's an upstanding person and an athlete and established, and we know the Clippers are an established NBA franchise. But if you might have NBA repercussions specific to the salary cap if that is a violation of it, and I'm sure they have people to do investigations on that. But that's a general premise. I mean, I'll give you one other example. Um, Employees of financial institutions are told anything that's over $10,000 that comes in and then goes out pretty rapid succession. Be aware, report that to your supervisory personnel. And there's also something called layering. So let's say you're to your point, trying to get $50 million. Well, let's try to do it with, I don't know, a bunch of $5,000 payments, and then no one will notice. If you see, that's called layering. That would just to get you need to get to a higher amount than 10 grand, but so you do a bunch of payments less than 10 grand, hoping no one's going to notice. Um, so that's the thing that struck me. I don't there's no criminal activity going on unless it benefited the Clippers in a tax situation or Kawhi in a tax situation. But it just I was like, oh, I had training on this. This is money in, money out.
Yeah. I think there's a couple things that other people aren't really talking about enough. One, if okay, let's say you and I go into business together, Ron, and we've got a large amount of capital and we want a big name athlete to sort of like promote our product.
Right.
Kawhi, because this would have been in 2020, I believe, when this all started. So Kawhi, fresh off winning his second championship, to date, the only NBA player to win NBA Finals MVP in two different teams, a top 10 player at the time, maybe not now because of his compounding injuries, but at the time, a top 10 player. Fair?
Yeah.
Right. But also the thing with Kawhi, Kawhi barely talks. He doesn't
Yeah.
have much of a social media presence. He doesn't really like talking to the media. Most people know nothing about him other than like in Toronto, and it was a big deal that he won the championship for us. And Kawhi, thank you for that. We're very, very grateful for that. But most of us kind of, the only thing we knew about Kawhi Leonard was that he wanted to go to play in LA. That's all we knew about him off of the court. So it didn't surprise us when he went there. And so I guess what they say that it was a bit of a hometown discount because he did leave some money on the table. Well, here's the money that he maybe would have got elsewhere. And again, Kawhi is not somebody who's going to make LeBron money out on endorsements. He's not making Chris Paul money on endorsements. He's not. I don't know what endorsements he's making at all. I mean, I'm sure he's got a Nike deal or a shoe deal like everyone does, but realistically, he's hundreds of millions behind the Steph Currys who you can
Yeah, but
commercial.
yeah, but even on that front, you at that point for these athletes, that's monopoly money. They
Right, but I'm
but
saying that we
no,
wouldn't.
no, no, no,
Okay.
no. But it's respect. Okay, it's like if you're with a company that's paying you $50,000 a year, and a competitor says, and like your boss at the 50 grand company says, it's been a tight year, and we'll get you a restaurant gift certificate, and hey, we'll give you $1,000 bonus and $2,000 more next year. And a competitor with a friend who used to work at that company says, hey, we'll give you 75 grand. It's yeah, the money's nice, and I'm just throwing those numbers out for numbers,
Hmm.
but you're saying, boy, they really value me. They really respect me for what I can bring. It's that's all it is to these guys. What are you going to do differently with 250 million that you wouldn't do with 200 million?
No,
Like if you and I got 2 million, someone said, I'm going to give you $2 million tax free, Kirk. And Ron, I'm going to give you $2 million tax free. We're set for life.
right, but I'm talking about from the perspective of paying somebody 50 million. I'm going to get far more value giving that $50 million to Paul George, who's got a podcast that's doing very well.
Oh
Paul
no, I
George,
understand. I understand that, but I'm
yeah,
just saying.
that's kind of where I was going with that. Kawhi Leonard, as good as he is, and yeah, he may have been the top 10 guy at that point. He wouldn't have been a top 10 choice for me to promote shit. I'd go with
Yeah,
that 7'7" Bob guy, guy who's always in a bunch of commercials.
yeah, but keep in mind when you sign a contract, okay,
Yeah,
it's on the contract saying, think of an NBA player gets injured,
yeah.
or an NFL player, like when my Broncos had Russell Wilson and decided that they wanted to move on from him. I mean, there's a certain portion that's guaranteed, as long as the player fulfills his part of the contract. So, like for example, this financial institution, if it was legit, let's say they were going out of business, if they have it in writing that you're going to get $50 million over whatever years, unless they're bankrupt, in which they can't be necessarily as a bank, they can cease operations, but there's a lot of guarantees. Um, he has to get paid, even if he doesn't do the commercial, unless he refuses to do the commercial. They say, Kawhi, hey, we need you in the studio, pick which of these 5 days. And he's like, go F yourself. Then in that situation, ain't going to happen.
And
Then
that
they can say
contract was good.
that's breach of contract.
And
But
the
if the
contract
company's going out of
everything,
business,
Ron. In that
what's that?
contract, he was allowed to turn down whatever he wanted.
Well, then they signed it. He signed it.
Which
But
also
but
leads me to think it sort of like
we're
goes back to that whole thing. Like, well, clearly this was just a way to move money around to your original point.
it's reasonable to say that and think that until all the facts come out. And keep in mind, the NBA might not be quite the NFL,
Mhm.
but I know more about the NFL than I do the NBA. The NFL has security people who worked probably for like the State Department and who were Secret Service members and for FBI and things like that to protect the NFL and its entities, and their investigative kind of stuff is pretty high level. In most sports leagues, because of the literal billions upon billions involved, and obviously the headquarters office is representing, 30 plus owners, depending on the sport. So the facts are going to come out. There's a smoking gun there. I'd say let's let the facts come out. But the one thing, to your point in the beginning, hey, you make a payment of 1.9 million, and then 1.5 million of that goes immediately out to an employee of the person who's making the payment to you, within a week, or I can't remember the time frame. Then yeah, that's like, whoa.
Okay.
I don't think there's criminal intent unless they're trying to deceive someone. But, or you don't know, for
Mhm.
example, Kawhi's tax forms that he gets. Is it something that's more advantageous coming from the bank than if it came from the team? Like, we don't know. We don't know. The facts will come out. The NBA will move heaven and earth.
Let's hope. I hope they do.
It will, because they what if it's happening elsewhere?
Well, I got two more points here. Well, one question rather, and then one point. So I'll go with the point first. Mark Cuban initially said that he's on Team Ballmer, not because he necessarily likes Steve. He didn't say it like that, but he just said Steve's not that stupid. Mark Cuban's decision making hasn't been the best in the last 12 months. Let's be blunt. Saying that, I saw a graph. I forget where I saw it, but it was on the X, and Ballmer is far richer than everybody else in the NBA. So I guess where I'm going with that, when we say how $50 million is pocket change for an NBA owner, for Steve Ballmer, it's lint. If this graph that I saw is accurate, and I don't know if it is or not, and I'm not really, even if I were to fact check it, I'm not that guy. I should have sent that off to you first and have you fact check it because you're the finance guy. But let's say it's right. Ballmer is the richest NBA owner, which I believe is true for sure. Numbers two
Yeah,
through 10 combined wealth does not equal Steve Ballmer.
What's he at? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't know if you want to sort of like take a check on that right now. We can
I
pause
can't. I
this.
can't. Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine. But no, I'm just saying, I'm in Denver, and we
Yeah.
have that luxury regarding some things that have gotten done that maybe other teams haven't been as effective with because of the cash flow.
So I guess where I'm going with that is for him, obviously you want to win. It's easier for him to do that because he's got more resources than anyone else. So let's just say also that this is true. He did funnel it. The duck, the thing that's quacking like a duck is in fact a duck. Let's just say it is. Does the NBA punish Kawhi Leonard? Because they didn't punish Joe Smith, if you remember that thing in Minnesota. They just voided the contract, which didn't really hurt him anyway because he didn't reach that point where he was going to get
This
those big bucks.
this is the new NBA and new economics.
Hmm.
Like what happened to Joe Smith was a while ago. It's really hard to say. The investigation, like even in politics, when you see stuff that seems sizzling, on Twitter or Facebook or wherever, or it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Getting to the bottom of the facts, whenever there's money there, you follow the money. And usually when it's big money, it's not like someone's, handing someone at a valet like $1,000 because they really appreciated them parking their car so well at a big event from like an NBA player. This is like millions, and it will be followed. It's not like they can just like say, "Oh, it's private information. We're not giving it to you." Um, there's they could probably subpoena, like file some sort of legal action. I would think. I'm not a legal expert, and maybe things would get subpoenaed or in discovery if the NBA really wanted to make a case. But I think Mark Cuban's pretty reasonable. He's made good judgments. I think he wanted to get away from basketball operations, and the people who took over made some decisions that he wishes he could have
I,
not let them make. But
I
other
think
than that,
Dallas might, I think a lot of Mavs fans might wish that he's still the owner.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
saying that though, Ballmer, I mean, if this is all true, Ballmer should be stripped or forced to sell the team. What do you do with Kawhi? I mean, Kawhi, the only thing dumber than him being paid $50 million not to do nothing is for him to say, yeah, okay, for him to say no.
Well, well, the other thing he could say, and again, you don't know what happened. You don't
No.
know what was signed and all that. But the agent came over to him and said, "Here, Kawhi, sign it here." He could say that. He could say, "Well, my agent told me that this was part of it and it was no big deal and everything's cool with the salary cap and the Players Association and we good." And that's all I know, and that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And that might be the truth. It might not be the truth, but that's how he could try to distance himself from it. You don't know what the NBA would do. Would you suspend the guy? It wasn't like he gambled on games. Um, it's really hard to say. And how enthusiastic is he playing now? Like, would he like a break? I know he's had a lot of injuries.
Yeah, he's been hurt an awful lot, and I don't know if he's even got an agent. I know his uncle is very very active in a lot
Well,
of negotiations, and that uncle has sort of been asking for impermissible benefits, which
well, then,
then this might have been his way to sort of do that. I don't know. Maybe it was something that was worked. Here's something. This could have been worked a side deal without Ballmer's knowledge. Because Ballmer, and again, you said it earlier, to his credit, I was very impressed. But although it did give me more questions than answers,
oh yeah,
he didn't hide. He went within 24 hours, he was on ESPN.
exactly.
And that made me think, well, usually you see people hide behind lawyers. He didn't do that. He went right there. He didn't have a buffer. He went there. And Is it possible that his uncle and Kawhi worked out something with them, and
You,
Ballmer just maybe didn't want to know about it?
you just don't know. I mean,
No.
and I'd say there's props to LeBron because like Rich Paul and his people have been very good at maximizing his opportunities. But I mean, that's something that's not been done with him because there's no need to. Like, you just don't know who was doing what.
Yeah.
But like whenever you have negotiations for like CBAs, when you have any negotiations or any controversies, and there's a lot of molecules flying around, kind of like you're and everything's like kind of not clear, but there's a smoking gun kind of thing. Always follow the money. It's always about the money. Even when they say it's not about the money, always about the money.
Yep. No, it's so true. Or like even said before, sometimes, well, it's not about money, it's about respect, which means pay me the money, which shows you respect me.
Well, yeah, you want market, but there are players who will take hometown discount as long as the money is kind of in there, but not pennies on the dollar. I mean, we just saw a situation in Dallas where Jerry thought he could dictate to Michael Parsons what he would be paid. You know, they sat on it for a couple months. The market went up, and the player said, "Hey, no, this isn't about me needing a few $1 million extra. I'm going to be fine with whatever money I get. But hey, you know, T.J. Watt and Max Crosby just got X amount of dollars. That's you are offering me this,
Mhm.
then my price just went up to kind of in that neighborhood." And it's the same with like Kawhi. He doesn't want some like fifth band making more money than him.
It's always fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
Ron, I told you that I was going to ask you something else. Initially, we reach out to each other, we were only going to talk about this, but since that time happened, the Pro Football Hall of Fame has put out the senior list. And first, I want to give the Pro Football Hall of Fame some props. They don't have to do this. This is only the second year that they've even done or shared a preliminary list on seniors. So for sites like Not in Hall of Fame, for me, this is great. Saying that, oh boy, do I have some criticisms. The people, I don't completely know how they decide who gets on this list. I think if you're nominated, great, but there's obviously somebody in the background. The grand wizard behind a curtain deciding this, and I don't know how some people have fallen off. A couple people who were close to your sphere in the Broncos world. Uh, Not so much in my Saints world because there really isn't any other. Pat Swilling's there, so obviously I'm happy because that's our biggest chance. But somebody who I hold in very high esteem, Darren Cherry, is not there, but he was last year. So I don't know how he falls off from last year to this year. And I believe you're the one who pointed this out to me. Andy Russell, he advanced
Yes,
50, did he not last year?
I believe so. And a pretty compelling case was made on his behalf.
Mm-hmm.
And, I witnessed that Steelers dynasty. I, is he a Hall of Famer based? But he did play with Jack Lambert and Jack Ham as the three linebackers. And that always hurts when you have two guys who are like that and you're like a little step below them in terms of perceptions. And that's what's hurt. Speaking of Steelers, thank God he's still there, but he's not had momentum. Is LC Greenwood?
Absolutely.
He gets the well. Joe Green was on that defensive line near him, so or he wasn't consistent or something ridiculous. The guy dominated Super Bowls. Like Fran Tarkenton in Super Bowl nine went back to pass. Greenwood was playing volleyball with him. If you ever saw that Fran Tarkenton catch his own pass that got swatted back at him and then try to run or pass with it, that was because of LC. The guy played big in big games and dominated. Rich Tombstone Jackson is my Bronco. And If
Who's
anyone
who
knows
is not? I just want just for those
who
listeners
just got
watching.
dropped, he just
Yeah,
got
he got
dropped.
dropped from it. Yeah.
Okay. And the thing with Rich Jackson, I can give you some great footage, and I'll in this when you tweet it, I will add it
Sure.
like in the string.
Yeah.
Uh, the guy dominated, short career. So by the definition of when he retired, Hall of Famer, no. By the definition of Kenny Easley, Tony Baselli, Terrell Davis, and others with shorter careers, heck yes. And here's the litmus test for him. Just Google him and look at film clips, and you'll see what I mean. Dr. Z, the late Paul Zimmerman, um, who really had an influence on Hall of Famers in terms of selector voting. He was someone most of the selectors looked up to. He was a leader who helps set a baseline. I know my Randy Gradishar people in Denver didn't like that he questioned Randy's tackle total going up by 50% 20 years after he retired. And there just needed to be clarification rather than, hey, he's got 50% more tackles. But Dr. Z would call things out and say, this is not right, or hey, this guy was truly great. And for Rich Tombstone Jackson, when Dr. Z did his all-time NFL team in the early 2000s, Rich Tombstone Jackson and Deacon Jones were the defensive ends. And that's pretty high praise. Pretty, like this is someone the guy just threw people around like rag dolls. Like he's a very colorful character. He claims he invented the head slap. I've chatted with John Turney, famous historian who's exceptional, and he's pretty sure that it was Deacon Jones. Uh, but Rich Jackson's quite the character and just was like the fiercest player on the field. And there's lots of other players like that in other cities. It's not just him. And it's 162 names. Um,
It's an interesting thing. Actually, do you want to go through like who was off and who was on?
no, there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Well, that's what I'm
The,
saying. I mean, like just even when
but,
you look at a lot of that, like,
but
go ahead.
I just want to say, my point is, you have guys like Bob Kuchenberg,
Mhm.
Eddie Meter, I'm sorry, Maxie Bond, um, help me, Ken Anderson,
Mhm.
who've been runners up when they went voting down to the three in the 2 years they did that. And those folks finished runner up where they were either fourth, fifth, or sixth. Sterling Sharp was another one of them where he did succeed. There's like no continued momentum for those guys. You also have Art Powell, who's in this current list, who I've spoken with the Hall of Fame selector regarding him, and he was very valid for the Hall of Fame and got rejected a year ago. But it's there's no focus to this process. Like if they're going to take the top seven in modern and automatically take the ones who didn't get selected for 2025 and put them in top 15 status for the next year, they could damn well do that for these guys who've been runners up consistently rather than make them start at 162. The Hall of Fame is much more concerned about the bottom line. If they're going to get people with Drew Brees and possibly Bill Belichick next summer, but they're more concerned with bringing in the money and getting visitors. They just did a high school football game with two Western Pennsylvania teams, Dan Marino's and Jason Taylor's, and because they're trying to get people there to bring in the money. They're failing at this process. Jim Porter, if you're listening, you're probably not, come on, the board needs to get its act together. These people are dying. Our friend Upton Bell jokes, but not jokes, but almost in a heartfelt way, that they should be sponsored by a funeral home. All these guys are dying. Lionel Taylor just died. There are other guys getting up there in age, and they need to fix this And you shouldn't, and one more part of my rant, you shouldn't have people like families of all-time greats who got rejected. Can you imagine the heartbreak of the Art Powell family, the heartbreak of Buddy Parker's family, 6 months before hearing he's a finalist, and then, oh yeah, we decided over some petty things that we didn't think they belonged. And 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 Maxie Bond and Eddie Meador, they passed away within 2 days to 2 weeks of the seniors vote in 2023 for 2024.
Mhm.
It's these guys are getting up there. They had great careers. Al Wistert's another one. It they've got to do something to fix the damn thing rather than, oh hey, we got 162 people. All you're doing is giving 30 plus fan bases hope, false hope. And and and
Yeah,
and then they're going to select three, and because of Belichick and
possibly Bob.
possibly Kraft,
Yeah.
then they can only vote for three of the five in an en masse vote, and then the senior ends up with like 41%, or not 41, like 60%, and doesn't get in, and another person dies the next year,
I
and
mean,
so on. Like it's, I'm
I think
sorry.
for me, well, I was just gonna say, no, no, sorry, Nita. I actually, I'm probably the one who interrupted though. It's, my solution for this has sort of been the same thing that I've said from day one since I started following this process. I don't understand why there needs to be a check and balance from what the senior committee comes up with. These are the creme de la creme of the historians of football. Why do they need to be fact checked again? Necessarily by people who, because there's people in that room, I'm not going to name who I think they are, who bluntly don't have the time or maybe interest to go through the history of anything that happened before they were born. They don't, that's not what they're there to do.
Well, some selectors have more of a loyalty to the franchise
Sure.
fan base that they covered and the athletes that they became friends with,
Mhm.
rather than the greater good specific to the NFL and historic greatness. Now, the flip side of that, a lot of those guys are in their 70s, pushing 80, and they've been eyewitnesses to seeing these players play. Whereas you have a lot of keyboard warriors, like for certain franchises, and they'll take some stats from an exceptional database like Pro Football Reference. John Turney has some incredible data out there on players to make apples to apples, but they'll cherry pick certain things from a just very good player and then say, well, he did X, Y, and Z, and 20 guys in the Hall of Fame have done A, B, and C. And the accomplishments that they're trying to use as a springboard for the Hall of Fame are, you're rolling your eyes. No, that's not something cool about it. And as you know, little plug, you see behind me,
Yep.
our good friend Richmond Webb for Pro Football Hall of Fame, someone in modern who's going into his second to last year, and we're trying to at least get the word out and conversation out because he did have a great career, and offensive linemen historically kind of get pushed to the side for the skill guys.
Yeah. Shout out
Uh,
to our friend Dan in France, who has done
yes,
a phenomenal job promoting him. I think I always said you were the template of how to get Randy Gradishar into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I think he's your Padawan, barring a
we're we're
Star Wars.
we chat daily, almost daily.
Okay, I didn't know
And
it
by
was
the way,
daily, so there
by
you
the way,
go.
his
So that
do you
was
know what
even
his last
better.
name is? Do you know what his last name is?
Oh, I just assumed the man.
Well, we're talking today on Monday, September 15th.
Okay,
Do you know whose birthday is today?
my brother.
Famous NFL, well, also famous NFL quarterback who I went to college with for a broadcasting class,
Who's that?
Dan Marino.
You went to college with Dan Marino, and I'm just finding this out now.
I thought I told you we were in a
Oh,
broadcasting 101 class. I didn't
oh,
realize it was
that.
him until the day after someone said he was in the broadcasting 101 Monday night class, and the gal who was in the class with me said, "Oh, didn't you see the professor who like almost stammer the name Marino Daniel, or and like her eyes like get big, and he was the guy and she said he was the guy sitting behind you. His legs were he's so tall, his legs were jammed. You know those college chair desk combos back in the day.
I
His
remember.
his
Yeah.
legs were like jammed in there, almost up against yours. And I'm like, I'm like, surprise.
No, no, I
Well,
I would have remembered that. I know I drink a lot, but I would have remembered that one for sure.
no, that's true story. I have got pictures somewhere, and I did very well in my final exam, thanks to his acumen specific to camera shot abbreviations. Let's leave it at that.
I'll leave it at that.
I'll
Well,
tell you
Ron,
the backstory. But no, Dan Marino is
yeah,
the guy's name in our friend Dan in Paris, but it's
yes,
Moreno.
that's his last name.
Yes.
How did you know that? Well, it's funny. I guess you just never asked. Every time we're sort of like talking to each other, we always talk sports.
And he's bringing fans together across the globe,
Yep.
specific to Richmond Webb and the Dolphins, positivity. And also, if anyone's out there watching, like we can give you his Twitter and other platforms. Fantastic. He was doing kicking camps with some
Mhm.
of the Paris Musketeers, which Jack Del Rio
Saw that,
is
yeah, on
coaching.
Instagram. I saw that.
Yeah. And he's doing a weekly Friday podcast with Richmond Webb about the state of the Dolphins. Well, that's not been fun so far, and other things. So,
Yeah, Saints
you
fan.
know,
Okay, I've got his handle on X. So Dan the man 17 underscore. So hey Dan, you're gonna be retweeting this, right, buddy? Okay. 'Cause we're
be
giving a
well.
shout out. We weren't planning to. Well, maybe Ron was based on his background, but
My friend Allie came up with the shirt. Allie Goodman, 2022 Dolphins Fan of the Year.
is that the venue you talk about a lot? You were always with pictures and stuff, or
Well,
yeah.
no, Allie was the year after me for Fan of the Year,
Oh, okay,
but
okay, okay.
but she actually lives in the same hometown in Florida where my folks live. So I actually connected, with a care package
Nice. Love it. Well,
recently too.
thank you so much.
Good-hearted people.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. I always sort of love it when you do always love it when we're connecting. And one last plug, the United States Athletic Hall of Fame, vote now because it's the only Hall of Fame where we're going to tell you how everything sort of played out, who finished first, and sadly, who finished last, and who got in. And it's all up to you. My vote, your vote, Ron's vote, it's all equal the same. You can sort of stuff the ballot box because you can vote every day. Can't vote multiple times a day, but you can vote every day. www.theUSAHOF.com. It's not just about football, basketball, baseball. 17 different sports are currently represented on the ballots for athletes, coaches, and contributors. And,
Fantastic project, and it's a privilege to be part of it.
and it's a privilege to have you. So, as I always close off, wherever you are, wherever you may be, make the day count because it never comes again. Take care, everybody.